Hey, how's it going? This is Matt Singleton with Bible Smack Radio. Just Bible Smack Masters. Anyway, today I am reviewing a Old Earth, Young Earth debate between Hugh Ross and a fella, not real familiar with him, Malcolm something. I'll have it on the video. He's a British guy, so in America it's pretty far away. But basically, they kind of had a Old Earth, Young Earth debate, and I've just noticed a lot of things about the evangelical movement and the embodiment of these flaws I see on this issue is with Hugh Ross. Hugh Ross represents the Old Earth evangelical. And so he opens up his debate talking about the Hebrew word yom, which is day. And he says that the Hebrew word has 6 literal meanings. I don't think every single word is literal. If every single definition is literal, then you don't really have one meaning out of it. Okay, you have implied meanings, implied definitions, or symbolic definitions. But he says they're all literal. And this goes back to a problem that we see with Bible versions. Hugh Ross actually does mention that he started out reading the King James and he read other Bible versions. Not only versions that might have a different text that they're translating from, because, ultimately most of the Old Testament are usually based off of the Masoretic text. There's not a whole lot of variation. There's some with other translations using the Septuagint, using the Vulgate, mixing it up there, and maybe a couple different rabbis and stuff. But basically, what they're really doing is they're really kind of focusing on a different translation philosophy. And that translation philosophy is one that has more of a dynamic equivalency when they're not really looking for every word. So he starts focusing on non-literal translations as he's developing his understanding as a youth when he's looking at this. But he says, you could take, the word day to mean so many different definitions. So what? If I want to understand what a message is telling me, especially if I deem this to be a message from God, I want the one, or the most likely definition. Okay? I don't care if a word can be taken this way. I don't want to take it any way that I can make it. Okay? And that's one of the problems in evangelicalism today is we look at interpretation as something, well, you can just take it any way you want to. No, there's different possibilities, but we want to get the best possibility. We want to get this accurate and correct. So then we look at this, and for instance, in the King James, it says that in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. So, he uses a different translation, Hugh Ross does, the heavens and the earth. And then after that, we see in verse 5, it says, "And God called the light day, and the darkness called night, and the evening and the morning were the first day." So it says, "were the first day." So everything before that, and if you look, it says, and. Everything is connected linguistically, okay? Verses 1 through 5 is totally connected linguistically, and. Okay. So the language says one day. If you look at the word, day, and you compare it with the darkness, okay, you think day and night, and then you think the way the word day is used in general, but then you also use evening and the morning, well, that does symbolize completion. So it's a completion of a time period, and the time period was a day. Otherwise, how long would the night be? Okay, we're going to break this down into like 6 periods. And you got this long day that lasts 20,000 years with a 20,000-year night, and the evenings and the mornings. Come on, get real, okay? Evening and morning is generally what the ancient Jewish mind or the ancient Hebrew mind would understand as a day. So then as I look on the debate, there was a quote from a Hebrew scholar named James Barr, a guy out of England, and he said to his knowledge, nobody who was seriously into Hebrew scholarship understood Genesis to be either saying that there were long periods or that the ancient manuscripts are trying to tell us that there was not a worldwide flood. Hugh Ross was kind of aggravated with that, and he said, well, no, I've got some theologians here, and they say this. Well, the key is that he says evangelical theologians. Number one, the evangelicals became a very extreme minority earlier in the century, okay, in the 20th century. Number two, which is very important, is that these were theologians. In other words, they're thinking theology first, and systematic and historical theology first, and they're thinking, secondly, of, in other words, they're not really thinking objectively. They wanted to say that the Bible was inerrant, but they did not want to cross paths with modern science. They did not want to have that fight. Okay, and so since they backed down, since they chickened out, they had to make a compromise. Liberals who did not believe the Bible was the Word of God, even though they didn't believe the Bible was the Word of God, they could say this is what this book is saying because they didn't have anything that they were betting on. Okay, so the liberals would look at this and they'd say, well, yeah, it says 7 days. That's not true. That's why I don't think the Bible's true, but that's what it says. Okay, well, I happen to think the Bible is smarter than us. Okay, so I don't have a problem like this, like the pure liberal saying, here's what it says. And I do believe it like the evangelical, but I don't have to twist it around. So that was kind of something of explaining what was going on there. And then he talks about how the laws of physics are unchanging. Okay? And he cites a couple different passages. This is one of the key problems that he has, because this is not really good science. Okay? To say that the laws of physics are pure and unchanging. Number one, I've kind of talked about this concept before. It's a philosophical problem called the inductive fallacy. It's this big assumption that you're making. Everything is exactly as it always has been. Okay? You cannot prove that everything is exactly as it always has been. And you can say, well, I'm going to make this guess based on that. Well, that guess doesn't really amount to a whole lot. Also, there have been reports that the speed of light, they've found that the speed of light has changed over time, and that it has slowed down, on a microscopic scale. Don't get me wrong, but it has slowed down over time. There is a young Earth physicist named Russell Humphreys, and he has kind of looked at things with Einstein's theory of general relativity, and that's another thing, relative or objective. Saying that the physics is unchanging, that's objective, okay? That's saying that it's, purely, just as good. And he always says there's two books that God gives us, one of nature and one's the Bible. That's what Hugh Ross teaches. You can say that, but not only do you have a problem with the Bible, you got a problem with science. Okay, science is not objective. That's why we say general relativity. Okay? It is not something that we know for absolute certainty. There are many different factors, and that's why people keep on getting corrected over time. So, Hugh Ross has a little bit of what I like to call scientism. This whole belief, this almost religious devotion to science. Another thing is that Hugh Ross assumed the geological column was true. He is not a geologist, he was an astronomer. Okay? And so he was taught this basic geology and said, this is the way it is, here's the geological column. And I've done some reports on this myself on my blog of the history of where that actually comes from. It was a guess, and it was basically trying to prove evolution. Okay? It goes hand in hand with evolution. The ages of the rocks were based off the ages of the animals, and the ages of the animals were based off the ages of the rocks. What's that? That's circular reasoning, okay? And they've never dug up a perfect geological scale. And I'm not even a fully perfect geological scale. So, geology doesn't work. Malcolm talked about that. He talked about every single time they found an animal, no matter where it was, and it was everywhere because the whole scale's all messed up. You go digging in the earth, you'll find all sorts of chaos, okay, different layers on different layers. But all these animals they find are perfectly formed. They're all intelligently designed. They don't find any half animals, and that's what you need if you want evolution to happen. You have to have an intermediate species. They don't have the intermediate species. He argues about issues involving too much biomass, and what he's kind of doing there is like he's saying that there's too much biomass in the earth. Even if you had the Great Flood, there'd still be more. Well, it depends on what we call biomass. Like, for instance, they talk about coal, oil, natural gas. Is it necessarily always from plants and animals? Could it have been from something else? And also, how fast does it take to make it? Well, guess what? They can make oil, they can make coal and natural gas all by themselves. So we go back, the book of nature, okay, this idea of revelation. We have this revelation of science. Well, it's not objective. So if science is not objective, the Bible is not objective. And now you have this unending. You don't have a complete truth, because you have the truth and then all the infinite other types of possibilities of truth. So you're never objective. It's never totally true. You're waiting, okay? Well, the Word of God is supposed to make, is for the man to be made perfect. Doesn't mean absolute perfect, means complete. Well, you can't be complete if you don't have the complete revelation of God. So that's what happens, and it's an assault on sola scriptura. The other thing is he talks about death and animals. Okay, now he brings up Romans chapter 5, and he talks about Adam and death, and he says, well, it never brings up animals, okay? In Romans, it never brings up animals and death. Well, it doesn't bring it up in chapter 5. But look what it says in Romans chapter 8, starting at, let's see here, verse 22. It says, for we know that the whole of creation, let me go back to 21, because or 20. It says, for the creature was made subject to vanity or emptiness, not willingly, but by reason of him who hath subjected the same in hope, because the creature itself also shall be delivered from bondage of corruption into the glorious liberty of the children of God. For we know that the whole creation groaneth and travaileth in pain together until now. And not only, they, but ourselves also, which have the first fruits of the Spirit, even we ourselves within ourselves, grown within ourselves, waiting for the adoption, to wit, the redemption of our body. So we're all in pain. Well, if humanity's in pain, we know it comes from Adam. And if the animals are in pain with him, that comes from Adam. God is not the same God of evolution, okay, or of any type of evolution, even progressive creation, where you have this idea that God had to kill, and God had to kill, and God had to kill just to make one thing, and it was very good. God even had to kill humanoids, according to Hugh Ross's view. Okay, because they have the Neanderthals in a different section geologically. They say they're 1 million years old. Therefore, God had to kill humanoids. Oh, just to make one good man. No, that is not very good. Okay, life is precious. Why would God kill and kill and kill? Oh, he had to kill. Did he really? I thought God was all-powerful. He could do what he wanted to. Alright, and, astronomy observes the past. There was a guy named Abraham Loeb with Harvard Astrophysics, and he said that we do not understand star formation at a fundamental level. Okay? They've never seen stars form. So if they don't know how stars form, then how can they say, we know exactly what happened? They don't. Okay? And call me crazy, but,